The opulent chandeliers of Le Petit Chateau cast a warm, golden glow over the bustling dining room, their light dancing off the polished silverware and crystal glasses that adorned each meticulously set table. It was here, amidst the gentle clinking of cutlery and the murmur of hushed conversations, that fate decided to play its cruel trick on Adam Rothschild and Maria Gonzalez. Adam, the sole heir to the Rothschild fortune, sat alone at his usual corner table, absently swirling a glass of Chateau Margaux 1982. His piercing blue eyes, usually filled with confidence and charm, seemed distant and troubled. At 28, he was the epitome of success, devastatingly handsome, with a chiseled jawline and perfectly coiffed dark hair. He could have stepped right off the cover of a fashion magazine. Yet, despite his wealth and status, something was missing in his life, a void he could. As he raised the glass to his lips, a commotion near the kitchen doors caught his attention. A young waitress had stumbled, sending a tray of hors d'oeuvres clattering to the floor. The maitre d' rushed over, his face contorted with barely contained fury as he berated the girl in hushed but harsh tones. Adam found himself rising from his seat, drawn to the scene by an inexplicable force. As he approached, he caught sight of the waitress's face for the first time, and his breath caught in his throat. She was stunning, not in the polished, artificial way of the socialites he usually encountered, but with a raw, natural beauty that seemed to radiate from within. Her large, dark eyes were brimming with unshed tears as she knelt to clean up the mess, her hands trembling slightly. Her long, raven black hair had escaped from its neat bun, cascading over her shoulders in silky waves. There was something so vulnerable, so genuine about her that Adam felt an overwhelming urge to protect her. "Is everything all right here?" Adam asked, his voice cutting through the tension like a knife. The maitre d' immediately straightened, his demeanor shifting from anger to obsequious deference in the blink of an eye. "Mr. Rothschild, I apologize for this disturbance. I assure you, this clumsy girl will be dealt with appropriately." Adam's jaw clenched at the man's words. He turned to the waitress, who was now standing, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and gratitude. "What's your name?" he asked gently. Maria," she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. "Maria Gonzalez." "Well, Maria," Adam said, offering her a warm smile, "accidents happen. I'm sure it wasn't your fault. Why don't you take a moment to compose yourself?" The maitre d' looked as if he wanted to object, but one stern glance from Adam silenced him. Maria nodded gratefully and hurried towards the staff area, leaving Adam standing there, feeling as if his world had shifted on its axis. From that moment on, Adam found himself returning to Le Petit Chateau night after night, always requesting to be seated in Maria's section. He was captivated by her gentle demeanor, her quiet strength, and the way her eyes lit up when she talked about her dreams of becoming a nurse. Maria, for her part, was wary at first. She had heard stories about wealthy men like Adam, how they toyed with the hearts of girls like her, only to discard them when they grew bored. But as the weeks passed, she found herself slowly letting her guard down. Adam was different from anyone she had ever met. Despite his privileged upbringing, he was kind, genuinely interested in her life, and treated her with a respect she had rarely experienced. Yet, against all odds, love blossomed between them. They found moments to steal away together, walks in the park, quiet dinners at hole-in-the-wall restaurants where Adam wouldn't be recognized, and long conversations that stretched into the early hours of the morning. Adam was enchanted by Maria's resilience, her unwavering optimism in the face of adversity, and the way she saw beauty in the simplest things. Maria, in turn, was drawn to Adam's hidden vulnerability, his desire to make a difference in the world beyond his family's wealth, and the gentle way he looked at her, as if she were the most precious thing in the universe. As their relationship deepened, they both knew they were entering dangerous territory. Adam's family had expectations. He was meant to marry someone from their social circle, someone who could navigate the complex world of high society with ease. Maria was acutely aware of the vast chasm between their worlds, and the disapproving looks she received from the staff and patrons of Le Petit Chateau whenever Adam visited her at work. But love, in its purest form, has a way of overshadowing all obstacles. And so, on a moonlit night in the rose garden of the Rothschild estate, Adam knelt before Maria, presenting her with a diamond ring that had belonged to his grandmother. "Maria Gonzalez," he said, his voice trembling with emotion, "you've brought light and love into my life in a way I never thought possible. Will you marry me?" Tears streamed down Maria's face as she nodded, too overcome with joy to speak. As Adam slipped the ring onto her finger, neither of them could have imagined the storm that was brewing on the horizon, a tempest of long-buried secrets and shocking revelations that would test the very foundations of their love. For in the shadows of the Rothschild mansion, Adam's father, Charles Rothschild, watched the scene unfold from his study window. His face was ashen, his hands gripping the curtains so tightly his knuckles turned white. He recognized something in Maria's features, a ghost from his past that he had tried desperately to forget. As he watched his son embrace his new fiancée, a sickening realization began to take root in Charles's mind. If his suspicions were correct, this engagement was more than just a misalliance of social classes. It was a ticking time bomb that threatened to destroy everything he had built. With trembling hands, Charles reached for the phone on his desk. It was time to make some discreet inquiries, to uncover the truth he feared more than anything. For if he was right, the love story unfolding in his garden was about to become a nightmare from which none of them might ever wake. As the newly engaged couple shared a passionate kiss under the stars, blissfully unaware of the eyes upon them, the wheels of fate had already been set in motion. Their journey of love was about to take a turn into a labyrinth of shocking discoveries, heart-wrenching decisions, and a truth so devastating it would shake the very foundations of their world. The stage was set for a drama that would rival the most sensational of telenovelas, a story of love, betrayal, and long-buried secrets that was about to explode into the lives of Adam, Maria, and the entire Rothschild family. Little did they know, their greatest challenge was yet to come, and the true test of their love was only just beginning. The news of Adam Rothschild's engagement to Maria Gonzalez spread through New York's elite circles like wildfire. Whispers and scandalized gasps echoed through country club lounges and charity galas. The heir to the Rothschild fortune, engaged to a waitress? It was unthinkable, a scandal of epic proportions. But for Adam and Maria, ensconced in the warm cocoon of their love, the outside world faded away. They spent their days planning their future, dreaming of a life filled with love and purpose. Adam spoke of using his wealth and influence to make a difference in the world, inspired by Maria's compassion and dedication to helping others. Maria, in turn, shared her hopes of finishing her nursing degree and working in underserved communities. However, as the initial euphoria of their engagement began to settle, the reality of their situation started to sink in. The first cracks in their fairy tale appeared when Adam decided it was time for Maria to meet his family properly, not as a waitress, but as his fiancée. The Rothschild mansion loomed before them, a monument to old money and power. Maria, dressed in a simple but elegant blue dress, the most expensive thing she had ever owned, clutched Adam's hand tightly as they ascended the grand staircase. "Don't worry, my love," Adam whispered, sensing her nervousness. "They'll adore you, just as I do." But as the massive oak doors swung open, revealing the opulent foyer with its marble floors and priceless artwork, Maria felt her heart sink. This world, so far removed from everything she knew, seemed to scream that she didn't belong. Charles Rothschild stood at the top of the sweeping staircase, his wife Evelyn by his side. Charles was a commanding presence, his silver hair and piercing blue eyes, so like Adam's, exuding an aura of authority. Evelyn, elegant in a tailored Chanel suit, regarded Maria with a mixture of curiosity and barely concealed disdain. "Father, Mother," Adam said, his voice filled with pride, "I'd like you to meet my fiancée, Maria Gonzalez." There was a moment of tense silence before Charles descended the stairs, a practiced smile on his face. But as he drew closer to Maria, something flashed in his eyes, a look of recognition quickly masked by polite interest. "Welcome to our home, Miss Gonzalez," Charles said, taking her hand. As their eyes met, Maria felt a strange shiver run down her spine. There was something in Charles's gaze, a depth of emotion she couldn't quite understand. Evelyn's greeting was cooler, her handshake brief and impersonal. "What an unexpected pleasure," she said, her tone making it clear that unexpected was not necessarily a positive thing. As they moved to the drawing room for drinks, Maria couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Charles kept stealing glances at her when he thought no one was looking, his brow furrowed in concentration as if trying to solve a puzzle. The conversation was strained, filled with awkward silences and thinly veiled probing questions about Maria's background. Where had she grown up? What did her parents do? Did she have any siblings? Maria answered as best she could, acutely aware of how humble her origins must sound in this palatial setting. She spoke of her childhood in a small town upstate, of her mother who had passed away when Maria was young, and of the grandmother who had raised her. With each answer, Charles seemed to grow more agitated, though he tried to hide it behind sips of his scotch. Evelyn, for her part, made little attempt to mask her disapproval, her comments laced with condescension. "And your father, dear?" Evelyn asked, her voice syrupy sweet. "What does he do?" Maria tensed, a subject she had always found painful. I never knew my father," she admitted quietly. "He left before I was born." At these words, Charles abruptly stood, his face pale. "Excuse me," he muttered, hurrying from the room. Adam, confused by his father's behavior, quickly moved to comfort Maria. "I'm so sorry about this," he whispered. "I don't know what's gotten into them." But Maria barely heard him. Her eyes were fixed on the doorway through which Charles had disappeared, a strange feeling of unease settling in her stomach. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of uncomfortable small talk and pointed remarks from Evelyn about the importance of maintaining certain standards in the Rothschild family. By the time Adam and Maria left, both were emotionally drained. "That didn't go quite as I'd hoped," Adam said as they drove back to the city. "But don't worry, they'll come around. They just need time to get to know you." Maria nodded, but deep down, she wasn't so sure. The way Charles had looked at her, the intensity in his eyes, it had stirred something in her memory, a half-forgotten dream or a long-buried feeling she couldn't quite place. Little did she know that at that very moment, back in the Rothschild mansion, a storm was brewing that would change all their lives forever. Charles paced in his study, a tumbler of scotch clutched in his trembling hand. The moment he had seen Maria up close, the resemblance had hit him like a physical blow. Those eyes, that smile, they were unmistakably Elena's. Elena, the name he had forced himself not to think about for nearly 3 decades. The secret that he had buried so deep, he had almost convinced himself it never happened. But now, the past had come crashing back into his life in the most unexpected and horrifying way possible. Could it be true? Could Maria really be? With a shaky hand, Charles reached for the phone. It was late, but this couldn't wait. He dialed a number he knew by heart but had never used. "Jack? It's Charles Rothschild. I need you to look into someone for me." Discreetly. "Her name is Maria Gonzalez." As Charles set the wheels of investigation in motion, across the city, Adam and Maria were having a conversation of their own. Curled up on the couch in Adam's penthouse apartment, Maria voiced the fears that had been gnawing at her all evening. "Adam, be honest with me," she said, her dark eyes serious. "Do you think this can really work? Your family, your world, it's so different from everything I know." Adam took her hands in his gaze intense. "Maria, listen to me. I love you. Not your background, not your job, not what you can or can't bring to the Rothschild name. I love you for who you are. Nothing else matters." Tears welled up in Maria's eyes at his words. "I love you too," she whispered. "So much it scares me sometimes." As they held each other close, both were unaware of the forces already in motion that would test their love in ways they could never have imagined. Days passed, and Charles grew increasingly agitated as he waited for news from his investigator. He became distant, snapping at Evelyn and avoiding Adam's calls. The truth was, he was terrified of what he might learn. Finally, after a week that felt like an eternity, Charles's private line rang. It was Jack. "I've got the information you wanted, Mr. Rothschild," Jack said, his voice grave. "You might want to sit down for this." With a growing sense of dread, Charles listened as Jack laid out the facts. Maria Gonzalez, born in a small town upstate. Mother: Elena Gonzalez, deceased. Father: unknown. But it was the next piece of information that made Charles's world come crashing down around him. I managed to get access to Ms. Gonzalez's birth certificate, Jack continued. The father's name was left blank, but there was a note in the hospital records. Apparently, the mother mentioned a man named Charles as the father, but refused to give any more details. The phone slipped from Charles's numb fingers, clattering to the floor. It was true. His worst fears confirmed. Maria, the woman his son was planning to marry, was his own flesh and blood, the daughter he never knew he had. The room spun around him as the full implications of this revelation hit home. Adam and Maria were half-siblings. Their love, their engagement, it was a cruel trick of fate, a ticking time bomb that threatened to destroy everything. Charles stumbled to his desk, collapsing into his chair. What was he going to do? How could he possibly tell Adam and Maria the truth? The scandal would be enormous, potentially ruining not just the Rothschild name but devastating two innocent lives in the process. As he sat there, his mind racing with the impossible situation, Charles was unaware that fate was about to throw another curveball his way. Across town, in her tiny apartment, Maria was going through a box of her mother's old belongings. It was something she did from time to time when she was feeling nostalgic or needed to feel close to the mother she had lost too soon. As she sifted through faded photographs and cherished mementos, her hand brushed against something tucked away at the bottom of the box. Curious, she pulled it out. It was an old envelope, yellowed with age, the paper brittle under her fingers. With trembling hands, Maria opened it, unfolding the letter inside. As she read the first lines, her heart began to race. The letter was from her mother, Elena, dated just a few months before Maria's birth. It was addressed to someone named Charles. "My dearest Charles," the letter began. "By the time you read this, if you ever do, I will be gone, and our child will have been born." Maria's vision blurred as she continued reading, her mother's words painting a picture of a passionate love affair, a wealthy man torn between his family obligations and his heart, and a decision made to protect everyone involved. But it was the last paragraph that made Maria's blood run cold. "I've decided to name her Maria, after your grandmother. I hope that someday, if fate allows, you'll meet her and see in her eyes the love we once shared. She is the best of both of us, Charles. Our beautiful, secret daughter." The letter fluttered from Maria's numb fingers as the truth crashed over her like a tidal wave. Charles Rothschild, Adam's father, was her father too. In that moment, as Charles sat in his study grappling with the weight of his secret, and Maria stared at the letter that had shattered her world, the stage was set for a confrontation that would change all their lives forever. The star-crossed lovers, Adam and Maria, blissfully unaware of the tempest about to engulf them, were planning their engagement party. It was to be a grand affair, a celebration of their love and a chance to silence the whispers of disapproval that still lingered in their social circles. Little did they know that their fairy tale was about to turn into a nightmare, as long-buried secrets clawed their way to the surface, threatening to tear apart not just their relationship, but the very fabric of their identities. As the sun set over New York City, casting long shadows across the streets, the players in this tragic drama were each lost in their own thoughts, unaware that their paths were about to converge in a way none of them could have ever imagined. Charles, drowning in guilt and indecision, poured himself another drink, trying to find the courage to do what he knew must be done. Maria, her world turned upside down, clutched her mother's letter to her chest, tears streaming down her face as she grappled with the shocking truth of her parentage. And Adam, oblivious to the storm gathering around him, put the finishing touches on a surprise he had planned for Maria, a gesture of love that would now take on a cruel, ironic twist in light of the devastating revelations to come. As night fell over the city, the stage was set for a confrontation that would shatter illusions, test the bounds of love and forgiveness, and force each of them to confront the painful truths they had never dared to face. The Rothschild family secret, hidden for so long, was about to explode into the open, leaving no one unscathed in its wake. The question now was not if the truth would come out, but how much damage it would do when it did. In the quiet before the storm, as the city lights twinkled like stars fallen to earth, none of them could have predicted just how much their lives were about to change. The bonds of family, the power of love, and the weight of long-buried secrets were all about to collide in a perfect storm of emotion and revelation. The next chapter in this tale of star-crossed lovers was about to unfold, and nothing would ever be the same again. The morning of Adam and Maria's engagement party dawned bright and clear, a cruel mockery of the emotional turmoil brewing beneath the surface. The Rothschild mansion was a hive of activity as staff bustled about, hanging decorations and arranging elaborate floral displays. The air was thick with the scent of roses and anticipation, but for 3 people, the day held nothing but dread. Charles Rothschild hadn't slept a wink. He sat in his study, tie askew and hair disheveled, staring at the phone. He had spent the night wrestling with his conscience, trying to find the courage to make the call that would shatter his son's world. But every time he reached for the receiver, his hand would freeze, the words catching in his throat. How do you tell your son that the woman he loves, the woman he plans to marry, is his half-sister? Across town, in her tiny apartment, Maria sat on the edge of her bed, her mother's letter clutched to her chest. She had read it 100 times, each word etching itself deeper into her heart. The truth of her parentage, so long a mystery, now felt like a cruel joke. Charles Rothschild, the man who had looked at her with such strange intensity, was her father. And Adam, the love of her life, was her brother. The realization made her physically ill. She had spent the night alternating between bouts of tears and nausea, her mind reeling as she tried to make sense of this new reality. How could she face Adam now? How could she look into his eyes, knowing what she knew? And Adam, blissfully unaware of the storm about to break over his head, was putting the finishing touches on a surprise for Maria. He stood in the guest house on the Rothschild estate, surveying his handiwork with pride. The room had been transformed into a replica of the restaurant where they had first met, complete with the exact table where he had first seen her. It was here, surrounded by memories of their beginning, that he planned to present Maria with a gift, a family heirloom that would. As the morning wore on and guests began to arrive, the tension in the air grew thicker. Charles, having finally dragged himself from his study, stood greeting guests with a fixed smile that didn't reach his eyes. Evelyn, sensing something was amiss but unaware of the true nature of the problem, hovered nearby, her own smile strained. Maria arrived late, her eyes red-rimmed and her hands shaking as she stepped out of the taxi. She had debated not coming at all, but in the end, she knew she had to face this. She had to see Adam, to talk to Charles. She needed answers, even if those answers would destroy everything she held dear. As she walked up the pathway to the mansion, her eyes met Charles's. In that moment, a flash of understanding passed between them. Charles knew that she knew. The secret was out, and there was no going back. Adam, emerging from the guest house, caught sight of Maria and his face lit up with joy. He rushed to her side, enveloping her in a warm embrace. "You're here. I was starting to worry. Come, I have a surprise for you." Maria felt her heart breaking as she looked into Adam's excited eyes. How could she tell him? How could she destroy his happiness? Before she could say anything, Adam was leading her towards the guest house, chattering excitedly about his surprise. Charles, seeing this, felt a surge of panic. He couldn't let this go on any longer. He had to stop this before it went too far. "Adam, Maria, wait," Charles called out, his voice strained. Adam turned, confusion evident on his face. "Father? What is it?" Charles stumbled forward, his usual composure completely shattered. "We need to talk. All of us. Now." The urgency in Charles's voice caught everyone's attention. Guests turned to stare, sensing that something significant was about to unfold. Evelyn, alarmed by her husband's behavior, hurried to his side. "Charles, what on earth is going on?" she hissed. But Charles ignored her, his eyes fixed on Adam and Maria. "Please," he said, his voice breaking. "Come to my study. There's something I need to tell you both." The walk to the study felt like a death march. Adam, still confused, kept glancing between his father and Maria, trying to understand what was happening. Maria, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure everyone could hear it, felt as if she were walking to her own execution. As they entered the study, Charles closed the door behind them, shutting out the murmur of the party. The room felt airless, charged with an electricity that made the hair on the back of their necks stand up. "Father, what's this about?" Adam demanded, his patience wearing thin. "We have guests waiting. Maria and I." "Please, son," Charles interrupted, his voice heavy with emotion. "Sit down, both of you." As they took their seats, Charles remained standing, pacing back and forth like a caged animal. He opened his mouth several times to speak, but no words came out. How do you begin to say something that will change everything? Finally, Maria broke the silence. "It's about my mother, isn't it?" she said quietly. "About Elena." Charles stopped pacing, his face draining of color. "You know?" Maria nodded, tears filling her eyes. "I found a letter. Last night. She wrote to you, before I was born." Adam looked between them, bewilderment turning to concern. "What are you talking about? Father, do you know Maria's mother?" Charles closed his eyes, taking a deep breath. This was it, the moment of truth. When he opened his eyes again, they were filled with a lifetime of regret. "Adam, Maria, what I'm about to tell you will be difficult to hear. But please, I beg you to listen, to try to understand." And so, with a voice that shook with emotion, Charles began to tell his story. He spoke of a summer nearly 3 decades ago, of a young woman named Elena who worked at a small cafe upstate. He told of a whirlwind romance, passionate and all-consuming, but ultimately doomed by the expectations of family and society. "I was already engaged to your mother," Charles said, looking at Adam. "It was a marriage arranged by our families, meant to merge 2 powerful dynasties. I was too weak to stand up to the pressure. I chose duty over love." As Charles continued his tale, Adam felt as if the ground was shifting beneath his feet. He looked at Maria, saw the tears streaming down her face, and felt a growing sense of dread. "Elena was pregnant when I left," Charles said, his voice barely above a whisper. "She tried to tell me, but I was too much of a coward to face her. I convinced myself it was better this way, that the child would be better off without the complications of my world." The silence that followed was deafening. Adam stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "What are you saying?" he demanded, though deep down, he already knew the answer. Charles looked at Maria, then back at Adam, his eyes filled with unspeakable sorrow. "Maria is my daughter, your half-sister." The words hung in the air like a physical presence, suffocating and inescapable. Adam staggered back as if he'd been struck, his face a mask of shock and disbelief. "No," he whispered. "No, it can't be. This is a mistake, a cruel joke." But even as he said the words, Adam knew they weren't true. He looked at Maria, really looked at her, and saw what he had been blind to before. The shape of her eyes, the curve of her smile, they were echoes of his father's features, of his own. Maria sat motionless, her eyes closed, tears flowing freely down her cheeks. She had known, had prepared herself for this moment, but hearing the words spoken aloud made it real in a way that shook her to her core. "I'm so sorry," Charles said, his voice breaking. "I never knew. I never allowed myself to know. When I saw you together, when I realized who Maria must be, I didn't know what to do." Adam's shock was quickly turning to anger. He whirled on his father, his eyes blazing with fury. "You didn't know what to do? You've had weeks, months. You saw us together, you knew we were in love, and you said nothing." "I was afraid," Charles admitted, shame evident in every line of his face. "Afraid of the scandal, of losing you, of facing the consequences of my actions after all these years." "Consequences?" Adam spat the word out like it was poison. "Do you have any idea what you've done? The pain you've caused? Not just now, but for Maria's entire life." Maria finally spoke, her voice small and broken. "All those years, wondering who my father was, why he didn't want me. And you were here, living your perfect life, while my mother struggled to raise me alone." Charles fell to his knees before Maria, reaching out to her but stopping short of touching her. "I'm sorry," he said, the words woefully inadequate. If I had known. If I had been braver. But Maria recoiled from him, standing up and backing away. Don't, she said. Please, just, don't. Adam moved to Maria's side, instinctively reaching out to comfort her before remembering the new, horrible reality of their situation. His hand fell away, and they stood there, close but separated by an unbridgeable chasm. What do we do now? Adam asked, his voice hollow. The question hung in the air, unanswerable. How do you move forward when everything you thought you knew has been turned upside down? How do you reconcile the love you feel with the knowledge that it's forbidden? Outside, the sounds of the party continued, a jarring counterpoint to the emotional devastation in the study. Laughter and music drifted through the closed door, a reminder of the celebration that was supposed to be happening, of the future that had been snatched away in the space of a few devastating minutes. Charles struggled to his feet, his face haggard. We need to tell your mother, he said to Adam. And the guests, we need to. No, Adam cut him off, his voice hard. You don't get to decide anything anymore. You've done enough. He turned to Maria, his eyes filled with a mixture of love and anguish. Maria, but what could he say? How could he put into words the maelstrom of emotions coursing through him? He loved her, with every fiber of his being, he loved her. But now that love was tainted, twisted into something that could never be. Maria met his gaze, her own eyes a mirror of his pain. In that moment, a lifetime of possibilities flashed before them. The wedding they had planned, the children they had dreamed of, the life they had imagined building together. All of it turned to ash in an instant. I have to go, Maria said suddenly, her voice choked with emotion. I can't be here. She turned and fled the study, leaving Adam and Charles standing there, frozen in the wreckage of their family's secrets. Adam made as if to follow her, but Charles caught his arm. Son, please. Adam wrenched his arm away, fixing his father with a look of pure devastation. Don't call me that, he said, his voice low and dangerous. You lost the right to call me son the moment you chose your reputation over the truth. With that, Adam stormed out of the study, leaving Charles alone with the weight of his choices. Out in the garden, guests were starting to whisper, sensing that something was amiss. The bride-to-be had run past them, clearly distraught, followed closely by the groom. The host was nowhere to be seen. Evelyn, tired of being kept in the dark, marched towards the study, determined to get answers. As she opened the door, she found Charles slumped in his chair, his head in his hands. Charles, she said, her voice sharp with concern and irritation. What on earth is going on? Where are Adam and Maria? Charles looked up at his wife, the woman he had chosen over Elena all those years ago. In her eyes, he saw the life he had built, the family he had raised. And now, with a few words, he was about to bring it all crashing down. Evelyn, he said, his voice weary beyond measure. Sit down. There's something I need to tell you. As Charles began his confession for the second time that day, Adam was racing through the streets of New York, desperate to find Maria. He knew he shouldn't go after her, knew that every moment in her presence would only make things more painful. But he couldn't bear the thought of her alone, dealing with this earth-shattering revelation. He found her in the park where they had spent so many happy hours together. She sat on their favorite bench, staring out at the pond, her face streaked with tears. Adam approached slowly, his heart breaking anew at the sight of her pain. Maria, he said softly. She looked up at him, and the love he saw in her eyes, even now, was almost more than he could bear. Adam, she whispered, what are we going to do? He sat down beside her, careful to maintain a distance that felt unnatural after months of easy intimacy. I don't know, he admitted. I don't know how to make this right. They sat in silence for a long moment, each lost in their own thoughts, grappling with the impossible situation they found themselves in. Finally, Maria spoke, her voice barely audible. I love you, Adam. I've never loved anyone the way I love you. And now. I know, Adam said, fighting back tears of his own. God, I know. I love you too. More than I ever thought possible. But we can't. The words hung between them, the truth they both knew but neither wanted to face. They couldn't be together. Not as lovers, not as husband and wife. The very thing that had brought them together, their connection, their shared blood, was now the insurmountable obstacle that would keep them apart. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the park, Adam and Maria sat side by side, mourning the future they had lost and trying to find the strength to face the uncertain path ahead. Back at the Rothschild mansion, chaos reigned. Evelyn, upon learning the truth, had flown into a rage, her carefully cultivated composure shattering like glass. Guests, sensing the discord, began to leave in droves, whispering amongst themselves about the scandal that was surely unfolding. Charles, emotionally exhausted and looking every one of his years, retreated to his study once more. As he poured himself a drink with shaking hands, he caught sight of his reflection in the window. The man staring back at him was a stranger, old, beaten, the weight of his secrets finally laid bare. As night fell over New York City, 4 lives lay in ruins, shattered by the explosive power of long-buried truths. The Rothschild family would never be the same again, their perfect facade crumbling to reveal the all-too-human flaws beneath. And somewhere in the gathering darkness, 2 star-crossed lovers clung to each other, trying to find the strength to let go, even as their hearts screamed for them to hold on tighter. The engagement party that was meant to be a celebration of love had become a wake for dreams destroyed and innocence lost. As the last of the decorations were taken down and the flowers began to wilt, the Rothschild mansion stood silent, a mausoleum to shattered hopes and the destructive power of secrets. The story of Adam and Maria, the millionaire's son and the waitress who turned out to be his half-sister, would soon spread through New York society like wildfire. But for the 4 people at the heart of the storm, the true depth of their pain would remain known only to them. As a new day dawned, bringing with it the harsh light of reality, each of them faced the daunting task of rebuilding their lives from the ashes of what once was. The road ahead was uncertain, fraught with challenges and heartache. But buried beneath the pain and betrayal, a small seed of hope remained. Hope that someday, somehow, they might find a way to forge a new kind of family from the wreckage of the old. The tale of the Rothschilds was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning, a story of redemption, forgiveness, and the enduring power of love in all its complex, messy, human forms. The weeks following the disastrous engagement party passed in a haze of pain and confusion for all involved. The Rothschild family, once the pinnacle of New York high society, had become the subject of whispered gossip and tabloid speculation. The story of the millionaire's son who fell in love with his own half-sister was too sensational to ignore, and the press circled like vultures, eager for any morsel of information. Adam had retreated to the family's summer home in the Hamptons, seeking solitude as he grappled with the shattering revelations that had turned his world upside down. He spent his days walking along the deserted beach, the crash of the waves echoing the turmoil in his heart. At night, he would sit on the deck, staring out at the dark ocean, a glass of whiskey in his hand and the memory of Maria's touch haunting his dreams. Maria, unable to face the pitying looks and hushed conversations at Le Petit Chateau, had quit her job. She threw herself into her nursing studies with a fervor that bordered on obsession, desperate for anything to distract her from the ache in her heart. Her tiny apartment, once a haven she shared with Adam, now felt like a prison, every corner holding a bittersweet memory of their time together. Charles Rothschild, the architect of this tragedy, found himself a pariah in the world he had once ruled. Old friends suddenly became scarce, business associates distanced themselves, and even his position at the head of the Rothschild empire seemed precarious. The board of directors, concerned about the scandal's impact on the company's reputation, had called an emergency meeting to discuss his future. Evelyn, her perfectly curated world shattered beyond repair, vacillated between bouts of icy rage and periods of numb despair. She had moved out of the master bedroom, unable to bear sleeping next to the man who had betrayed her so completely. During the day, she maintained a facade of normalcy, attending charity functions and social gatherings with a fixed smile and a steely determination to weather this storm with her dignity intact. But beneath the surface, all 4 of them were drowning, struggling to make sense of their new reality and find a way forward. It was Evelyn who made the first move to break the stalemate. After weeks of silence and separate lives under the same roof, she cornered Charles in his study one evening. "This can't go on," she said, her voice tight with suppressed emotion. "We need to talk about what happens next." Charles looked up from his desk, his face haggard and lined with worry. "Evelyn, She held up a hand, cutting him off. "I don't want your apologies, Charles. They're worth nothing to me now. What I want is a plan. How are we going to fix this mess you've created?" Her words were harsh, but there was an undertone of desperation that Charles recognized. Despite everything, she was still fighting for their family, for the life they had built together. "I don't know if we can fix this," Charles admitted, the weight of his actions heavy in his voice. "But you're right. We need to try." Over the next few hours, fueled by strong coffee and stronger determination, Charles and Evelyn began to piece together a strategy. They would face this head-on, they decided. No more secrets, no more hiding. They would call a press conference, tell their side of the story before the tabloids could spin it further out of control. But more importantly, they needed to reach out to Adam and Maria. The wounds were still raw, the pain still fresh, but if there was any hope of salvaging their family, they had to start now. As dawn broke over the city, Charles picked up the phone and dialed Adam's number. It rang several times before going to voicemail. Charles closed his eyes, gathering his courage, and began to speak. "Son," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "I know you probably don't want to hear from me right now. But please, give us a chance to make this right. Come home. Let's talk about this as a family. I love you, Adam. We both do. Please come home." Meanwhile, Evelyn steeled herself for an even more difficult conversation. She had obtained Maria's address from Charles and now stood outside the rundown apartment building, feeling woefully out of place in her designer outfit and pearls. Taking a deep breath, she pressed the buzzer for Maria's apartment. There was a long pause before a tired voice came through the intercom. "Yes? Maria? It's Evelyn Rothschild. May I come up? I think it's time we talked." The silence that followed seemed to stretch for an eternity. Finally, the buzzer sounded, and Evelyn pushed open the door, her heart pounding as she climbed the stairs to face the young woman who had unwittingly turned their lives upside down. Maria opened the door, her face pale and drawn. She looked nothing like the vibrant, beautiful girl who had captured Adam's heart at Le Petit Chateau. The past weeks had taken their toll, leaving her looking fragile and vulnerable. "Mrs. Rothschild," Maria said, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't expect to see you." Evelyn felt a surge of conflicting emotions, pity, anger, and a strange, unexpected protectiveness. This girl, for all the pain her existence had caused, was as much a victim in this as anyone. "May I come in?" Evelyn asked gently. Maria nodded, stepping aside to let her enter. The apartment was small but neat, with textbooks and notes scattered across the coffee table, evidence of Maria's attempts to lose herself in her studies. They sat across from each other, an awkward silence stretching between them. Finally, Evelyn spoke. "I owe you an apology, Maria," she said, her voice steady despite the turmoil in her heart. "I treated you unfairly when we first met. I judged you without knowing you, and for that, I am truly sorry." Maria looked up, surprise evident in her eyes. Of all the things she had expected Evelyn to say, this wasn't one of them. Thank you," Maria said hesitantly. "But Mrs. Rothschild, you don't owe me anything. If anyone should be apologizing, it's me. I never meant to cause your family such pain." Evelyn shook her head, a sad smile on her face. "You're not to blame for any of this, dear. You're as much a victim of Charles's choices as the rest of us. More so, perhaps." Tears welled up in Maria's eyes at these words, the kindness in Evelyn's voice breaking through the walls she had built around her heart. "I loved him," Maria said, her voice breaking. "I loved Adam so much. And now I don't know who I am anymore." Evelyn moved to sit beside Maria, tentatively placing a hand on the young woman's shoulder. "I know, dear, and Adam loved you too. Still does, I imagine. This situation, it's unimaginable. But we can't change the past. All we can do now is try to find a way forward." As Maria broke down, years of longing for a mother's comfort finally finding release, Evelyn held her, her own tears falling silently. In that moment, the last vestiges of resentment she had harbored towards this girl melted away. Maria was part of their family, whether they had chosen it or not. Back in the Hamptons, Adam sat on the beach, Charles's voicemail playing over and over in his mind. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink, but Adam barely noticed the beauty around him. His thoughts were consumed by the impossible choice before him. Could he go back? Face his father, the man who had lied to him his entire life? And what about Maria? The thought of seeing her again both thrilled and terrified him. He still loved her, God help him, he still loved her with every fiber of his being. But how could they ever move past this? As the last rays of sunlight disappeared beneath the horizon, Adam made his decision. He would go back to New York. Not for Charles, not for the family name, but for Maria. They needed to talk, to figure out where they stood and how to move forward. Even if they could never be together the way they had planned, they were bound by blood and shared pain. They needed each other now more than ever. The next morning, as Adam's car sped towards the city, Charles and Evelyn were preparing for the press conference that would change their lives forever. They had decided on complete honesty. No more secrets, no more lies. It was time to face the music and deal with the consequences of their actions. As the cameras flashed and reporters shouted questions, Charles stepped up to the microphone, Evelyn by his side. His hands shook slightly, but his voice was steady as he began to speak. Good morning. I've called this press conference to address the rumors and speculation that have been circulating about my family. What I'm about to tell you is not easy, but it's the truth. As Charles laid bare the secrets of the past, admitting to his affair with Elena and his discovery of Maria's true identity, the room fell into a stunned silence. It was unprecedented, a man of Charles Rothschild's stature airing his family's dirty laundry so publicly. But as he continued, something unexpected happened. The hard lines of judgment on the reporters' faces began to soften. The story that emerged was not one of calculated deception, but of human frailty, of mistakes made and lives forever altered. It was a story of love, misguided perhaps, but love nonetheless, and the terrible price paid for choices made in youth. As Charles finished speaking, his voice hoarse with emotion, Evelyn stepped forward. She took his hand in a gesture of unity that spoke volumes to the watching crowd. We stand here today not to ask for your forgiveness or understanding, Evelyn said, her voice clear and strong. We are here to take responsibility for our actions and to begin the process of healing our family. We ask only for privacy as we work through this difficult time. As they left the podium, ignoring the barrage of questions from the press, Charles and Evelyn felt a weight lift from their shoulders. The truth was out there now, for better or worse. They had taken the first step on the long road to redemption. Across town, in Maria's tiny apartment, Adam stood at the door, his heart pounding. He had seen the press conference on TV, watched as his parents laid bare the family secrets for all the world to see. Now, he stood on the precipice of his own moment of truth. He raised his hand and knocked, the sound echoing in the empty hallway. There was a moment of silence, then the sound of footsteps approaching. The door opened, and there she was. Maria looked up at him, her eyes wide with surprise and a myriad of other emotions Adam couldn't quite name. For a long moment, they simply stared at each other, the air between them charged with unspoken words and unfulfilled dreams. Finally, Adam broke the silence. Hi, he said softly, the word woefully inadequate for all he wanted to express. Hi, Maria replied, her voice barely above a whisper. They stood there, suspended in a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity. Then, slowly, Maria stepped back, opening the door wider in silent invitation. Adam hesitated for a moment, knowing that once he crossed this threshold, nothing would ever be the same. But as he looked into Maria's eyes, he knew there was no turning back. Whatever the future held, they would face it together. He stepped inside, the door closing behind him with a soft click that seemed to echo with the weight of destiny. As Maria led him to the small living room, Adam felt a glimmer of hope stir in his heart. The road ahead would be difficult, fraught with challenges they could scarcely imagine. But they were here, together, ready to face whatever came next. The story of the millionaire's son and the waitress who turned out to be his half-sister was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. A tale of love tested by fate, of family bonds strained but not broken, and of the enduring human capacity for forgiveness and redemption. As Adam and Maria sat down to talk, the city continued to buzz with the latest Rothschild scandal. But within the walls of that small apartment, something beautiful and fragile was taking root, the first tentative steps towards a new kind of love, a new kind of family, forged in the crucible of shared pain and unbreakable connection. The sun set on New York City, casting long shadows across the streets and painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. And in homes across the city, the Rothschild family, Charles and Evelyn, Adam and Maria, began the long, difficult process of rebuilding their shattered world, one painful conversation at a time. The scandal that had threatened to destroy them had also given them a chance at a new beginning. It was up to them now to seize that chance, to find a way to love each other not despite their shared blood, but because of it. The journey ahead would be long and fraught with challenges, but for the first time in weeks, there was hope. As night fell over the city, 4 hearts beat with a mixture of fear and anticipation, each aware that the dawn would bring with it a new chapter in their intertwined lives. The story of the Rothschilds was far from over. In many ways, it was just beginning. The weeks following the Rothschild family's public confession were a whirlwind of media frenzy, legal consultations, and emotional upheaval. The story had captivated the nation, sparking heated debates about love, family, and the far-reaching consequences of long-buried secrets. For Adam and Maria, the days blurred together in a haze of confusion and heartache. They found themselves in an impossible situation, bound by blood, separated by societal norms, yet undeniably drawn to each other. Their love, once a source of joy and hope, had become a painful reminder of what could never be. After their initial meeting in Maria's apartment, they had agreed to take some time apart to process their new reality. But the separation proved to be almost unbearable. They found themselves constantly reaching for their phones, typing out messages only to delete them unsent, their fingers hovering over the call button before pulling away. It was Maria who finally broke the stalemate. On a rainy Tuesday afternoon, she found herself standing outside Adam's penthouse, soaked to the bone and trembling with a mixture of cold and nerves. When Adam opened the door, his eyes widened in surprise. "Maria? What are you doing here? You're drenched." Without a word, Maria threw herself into his arms, clinging to him as if he were a lifeline in a storm. Adam hesitated for a moment, his body tense with the conflict between desire and propriety. But as Maria's tears soaked into his shirt, he found himself wrapping his arms around her, holding her close despite everything that stood between them. "I can't do this," Maria sobbed, her voice muffled against his chest. "I can't pretend that I don't love you, that I don't need you. I know it's wrong, I know we can't be together, but I don't know how to let you go." Adam closed his eyes, his own tears falling silently as he stroked Maria's hair. "I know," he whispered. "God, I know. I've been going out of my mind without you." They stood there in the doorway, holding each other as the rain poured down outside, creating a curtain that seemed to separate them from the rest of the world. In that moment, it was easy to forget the complications, the scandal, the biological truth that made their love forbidden. They were just Adam and Maria, 2 hearts beating as one. But reality has a way of intruding, even in the most perfect moments. As their embrace lingered, a voice called out from inside the apartment. "Adam? Who's at the door?" Maria stiffened in Adam's arms, pulling back to look at him with questioning eyes. Adam's face flushed with guilt as he stepped back, running a hand through his hair in a gesture of frustration. "It's my cousin, Emma," he explained quickly. "She's been staying with me, helping me deal with everything." As if on cue, Emma appeared in the hallway behind Adam. She was a petite blonde with kind eyes that widened in recognition as she saw Maria. "Oh," Emma said softly. "You must be Maria." "I'm Emma. I've heard so much about you." Maria felt a surge of irrational jealousy, quickly followed by shame. Of course Adam would need support during this time. And who was she to feel possessive? She had no claim on him, not anymore. "I'm sorry," Maria said, backing away. "I shouldn't have come." I'll go. No, wait. Adam reached out, catching her hand. Please, don't go. Come inside. We should talk. Emma, sensing the tension, quickly excused herself. I'll give you two some privacy. I need to run some errands anyway. As Emma slipped out, Adam led Maria into the living room. The space was exactly as Maria remembered it, filled with memories of happier times. How many evenings had they spent curled up on that couch, planning their future together? The thought brought a fresh wave of pain, and Maria found herself sinking onto the sofa, suddenly exhausted. Adam sat beside her, close but not touching, the space between them charged with unspoken emotions. For a long moment, neither of them spoke, the only sound the steady patter of rain against the windows. I've missed you, Adam finally said, his voice low and intense. Every day, every hour. I keep reaching for you, only to remember that we're siblings, Maria finished, the words tasting bitter on her tongue. Half-siblings. Adam nodded, his expression a mixture of pain and longing. I've tried to make sense of it, to reconcile what I know with what I feel. But I can't. When I look at you, I don't see a sister. I see the woman I love, the woman I wanted to spend my life with. Maria felt tears welling up in her eyes again. I know. It's the same for me. But Adam, what are we going to do? We can't be together, not the way we want to be. It's not just illegal, it's wrong. Adam supplied, the word hanging heavy between them. I know. Believe me, I know. I've spent weeks tying myself in knots over this. But Maria, I can't help how I feel. And I can't bear the thought of never seeing you again, of cutting you out of my life completely. Maria reached out, taking Adam's hand in hers. The simple touch sent a jolt through both of them, a reminder of the connection they shared. So what do we do? She asked softly. Adam squeezed her hand, his thumb tracing small circles on her palm. I don't know, he admitted. But I think we need to find a way to be in each other's lives. Not as lovers, but as family. As friends. It won't be easy, and it might hurt like hell, but the alternative is losing you completely. And I can't do that. I won't. Maria nodded, a small, sad smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Family, she repeated. I've never really had that before. Besides my grandmother, I mean. Well, now you have a whole crazy family to deal with, Adam said, attempting a light tone. God help you. They laughed together, the sound slightly strained but genuine. It was a small moment of levity in the storm of emotions, a reminder that beneath the complications and the pain, there was still a foundation of genuine affection and understanding between them. As the laughter faded, they found themselves looking into each other's eyes, the air between them thick with unresolved tension. For a moment, it seemed as if they might kiss, might give in to the longing that still pulsed between them. But Adam pulled back first, taking a deep breath to steady himself. We can't, he said softly. If we're going to do this, if we're going to try to build some kind of familial relationship, we have to set boundaries. Clear lines that we don't cross. Maria nodded, her heart aching even as she knew he was right. Boundaries, she agreed. No touching, no intimate moments. We treat each other like brother and sister, nothing more. The words felt strange on her tongue, but Maria knew they were necessary. If there was any hope of maintaining a connection with Adam, of being part of this newfound family, they had to learn to relate to each other in a completely different way. As they sat there, hands clasped but bodies carefully distanced, Adam and Maria began the difficult process of redefining their relationship. They talked for hours, sharing childhood memories, discussing their hopes and fears, and slowly, tentatively, beginning to see each other through a new lens. It was painful, this deliberate dismantling of their romantic connection. Every shared laugh, every moment of understanding was tinged with the bittersweet knowledge of what they had lost. But there was also a growing sense of something new taking root, a different kind of love, no less deep for being platonic. As the afternoon wore on, they were interrupted by the ringing of Adam's phone. It was Charles, asking them both to come to the family home for dinner. It was time, he said, for the whole family to come together and start the process of healing. Adam and Maria exchanged a look, a mixture of apprehension and determination in their eyes. This would be their first time facing Charles and Evelyn together since the truth had come out. It would be awkward, probably painful, but it was a necessary step. "We'll be there," Adam told his father, his free hand reaching for Maria's in a gesture of solidarity. As they prepared to leave the apartment, Adam and Maria stood facing each other, keenly aware that this was a turning point. From this moment on, they would be navigating a new kind of relationship, one that neither of them had ever anticipated. "Ready?" Adam asked softly. Maria took a deep breath, squaring her shoulders. "As I'll ever be," she replied. Together, they stepped out into the rain-washed city, heading towards a future that was uncertain but filled with the possibility of a different kind of love, a different kind of family. The road ahead would be challenging, filled with moments of temptation and heartache. But as they walked side by side, Adam and Maria felt a glimmer of hope. They might not have the fairy tale ending they had once dreamed of, but perhaps they could write a new story, one of family, forgiveness, and the enduring power of love in all its complex forms. As they approached the Rothschild mansion, both Adam and Maria felt a mix of trepidation and determination. The imposing structure, once a symbol of wealth and privilege, now seemed to loom over them like a physical manifestation of their family's complicated history. Charles and Evelyn were waiting for them in the foyer, their faces a mixture of anxiety and hope. For a moment, no one spoke, the air thick with unspoken emotions and painful memories. It was Evelyn who finally broke the silence, stepping forward with arms outstretched. "Welcome home," she said softly, including Maria in her gaze. "Both of you." As they moved into the dining room, the tension began to ease slightly. The table was set simply, a far cry from the formal dinners that had once been the norm in this house. It was a deliberate choice, Charles explained, to start fresh, to create new traditions for their unconventional family. Over a meal of comfort food, pot roast and mashed potatoes, dishes that Evelyn had prepared herself rather than relying on their chef, the Rothschild family began the delicate process of getting to know each other anew. They shared stories, asked questions, and slowly, tentatively, started to bridge the gaps that had grown between them. It wasn't easy. There were moments of awkwardness, of pain when a careless word reopened old wounds. But there were also moments of genuine warmth, of laughter that surprised them all with its authenticity. As the evening drew to a close, Charles raised his glass in a toast. "To family," he said, his voice thick with emotion. In all its complex, messy, beautiful forms. The others echoed the sentiment, their glasses clinking together in a promise of new beginnings. And as Maria looked around the table at these people who were now, for better or worse, her family, she felt a sense of belonging she had never known before. The road ahead would not be easy. There would be more difficult conversations, more painful adjustments. The outside world, with its judgments and expectations, still waited beyond the walls of the Rothschild mansion. But for now, in this moment, there was hope. Hope for healing, for forgiveness, and for a love that transcended conventional boundaries. The story of the millionaire's son and the waitress who turned out to be his half-sister was far from over. In many ways, it was just beginning. 1 year had passed since the fateful day when the Rothschild family's secrets were laid bare to the world. The scandal that had once threatened to tear them apart had, paradoxically, brought them closer together. But the journey had been far from easy. The Rothschild name, once synonymous with power and prestige, had taken a significant hit. Charles had stepped down from his position as CEO of the family company, handing the reins over to a trusted board member while he focused on repairing his personal life. Evelyn had thrown herself into charity work, channeling her pain and anger into helping others and, in the process, rediscovering a sense of purpose. Adam and Maria had faced perhaps the most challenging road of all. Learning to redefine their relationship, to love each other as siblings rather than romantic partners, had been a daily struggle. There had been moments of weakness, times when the old feelings threatened to overwhelm their resolve. But they had persevered, supported by therapy, both individual and family, and by their shared commitment to building a new kind of relationship. On a crisp autumn day, the Rothschild family gathered once again in the mansion's garden. The occasion was bittersweet. They were there to scatter Alina's ashes, Maria's mother, who had passed away years ago. Maria had kept the ashes all this time, unsure of what to do with them. Now, surrounded by her newfound family, she felt ready to say a final goodbye. As they stood in a circle, the golden leaves of the old oak trees rustling gently overhead, Maria stepped forward, the urn cradled in her hands. "Mom," she began, her voice wavering slightly, "I wish you could be here to see this. To see that I finally found the family you always wanted me to have. It's not the way any of us expected, but..." She paused, looking around at the faces of Charles, Evelyn, and Adam, each watching her with love and support. "But it's real, and it's ours." Charles stepped forward, placing a gentle hand on Maria's shoulder. "Elena," he said softly, "I failed you in so many ways. But I promise you, I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make it right. Our daughter will never want for love or family again." As Maria opened the urn, letting the ashes scatter on the wind, there wasn't a dry eye in the garden. It was a moment of closure, of honoring the past while embracing the future. After the ceremony, as they walked back towards the house, Adam fell into step beside Maria. "How are you doing?" he asked softly. Maria gave him a small smile. "I'm okay. It feels right, somehow. Like Mom's finally at peace." Adam nodded, understanding in his eyes. They had grown closer over the past year, but in a different way than before. The romantic love they had shared had transformed into something else, a deep, unshakable bond of siblinghood. It wasn't always easy, and there were still moments when the old feelings surfaced, but they had learned to navigate these waters together. As they reached the terrace, they found Charles and Evelyn deep in conversation with a young woman neither Adam nor Maria recognized. As they approached, Charles turned to them with a smile. "Ah, there you are," he said. "I'd like you to meet someone. This is Dr. Samantha Weber. She's a genetic counselor who's been helping us understand our unique situation better." Dr. Weber shook hands with Adam and Maria, her warm smile putting them at ease. "It's wonderful to meet you both," she said. "Your father has told me so much about you." As they settled into chairs around the patio table, Dr. Weber began to explain her work. She specialized in cases like theirs, families affected by genetic sexual attraction, a phenomenon that could occur between close biological relatives who meet for the first time as adults. "What you've experienced is more common than many people realize," Dr. Weber explained gently. "The taboo against incest is learned, not innate. When close relatives meet as adults, without having grown up together, they can sometimes develop romantic or sexual feelings for each other. It's a complex interplay of genetics, psychology, and circumstance." Adam and Maria exchanged a look, a mixture of relief and lingering pain in their eyes. Hearing their experience validated, understanding that they weren't alone in what they had gone through, was both comforting and bittersweet. "The important thing," Dr. Weber continued, "is how you've chosen to handle it. The steps you've taken to redefine your relationship, to build a healthy family dynamic despite the challenges, are commendable. Many families in your situation aren't able to do that." As the conversation continued, touching on the latest research in genetic counseling and the support systems available for families like theirs, a sense of peace seemed to settle over the group. They weren't alone in this journey. There were others out there who understood, who had faced similar challenges. As the afternoon wore on, the conversation shifted to lighter topics. They shared memories of Elena, laughed over childhood stories, and even began to make plans for the future. There was talk of family vacations, of holiday traditions they wanted to start, of the ways they could use their experience to help others facing similar situations. As the sun began to set, casting a warm golden glow over the garden, Adam found himself watching his family with a sense of wonder. A year ago, he had thought his world was ending. The love he thought would last a lifetime had been snatched away, replaced by a reality he could never have imagined. But now, looking at Maria laughing with Evelyn, at Charles engaged in earnest conversation with Dr. Weber, Adam realized something profound. Love, he understood now, was not limited to romance. The love he felt for Maria now, the fierce protectiveness of a brother, the deep understanding of a friend, the unshakable bond of shared experience, was every bit as powerful as the romantic love they had once shared. And his family, once a source of pressure and expectation, had become a sanctuary. They had weathered the storm together, emerging stronger, more honest, more truly connected than ever before. As if sensing his thoughts, Maria caught his eye across the table. She gave him a small smile, one full of understanding and shared history. Adam smiled back, feeling a surge of affection for his sister, a word that no longer felt strange or painful, but right. Later that evening, as the family said their goodbyes, there were hugs all around, warm, genuine embraces that spoke of forgiveness, acceptance, and love. As Maria hugged Charles, she whispered, "Thank you, Dad." It was the first time she had called him that, and the emotion in Charles's eyes was unmistakable. Adam and Maria left together, walking arm in arm down the long driveway. They had both moved out of their old places, finding new apartments that allowed them to be close but maintain their independence. It was another step in their journey, another way of redefining their relationship. As they reached the gate, they paused, looking back at the mansion that had once seemed so imposing. Now, it felt like home in a way it never had before. "Who would have thought," Maria said softly, "that the biggest scandal of our lives would lead to this?" Adam chuckled, giving her arm a gentle squeeze. "Life has a funny way of working out, doesn't it?" As they turned to go their separate ways, there was no sadness, no lingering regret. The love they shared had changed, evolved into something different but no less profound. They were family now, in every sense of the word. The story of the millionaire's son who fell in love with a waitress, only to discover she was his long-lost half-sister, had captivated the world. But the real story, the one that mattered, was what came after. It was a story of resilience, of the power of love to transform and heal, and of the true meaning of family. As Adam and Maria walked into the gathering darkness, towards their separate homes and intertwined futures, they carried with them the knowledge that they had survived the unthinkable. They had lost a dream but gained a family, and in doing so, they had written a new kind of love story, one of siblinghood, of chosen family, and of the enduring power of the human heart to love in all its complex, beautiful forms. The Rothschild family's journey was far from over. There would be more challenges ahead, more moments of doubt and difficulty. But they would face them together, bound by blood, choice, and a love that had been tested in the fires of adversity and emerged stronger than ever. As the lights of the city twinkled in the distance, promising new beginnings and untold possibilities, Adam and Maria knew that whatever the future held, they would always have each other, and the family they had forged in the crucible of scandal and truth. Their story, once a sensation splashed across tabloid headlines, had become something far more profound, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the transformative power of unconditional love.